halls of West Virginia resound with the sound of Golden Blue football.
Almost heaven, West Virginia.
Now let's bring on the Mountaineers. Goes around about the 15 to 10 to 5. A touchdown, West Virginia. He did it.
He did it. Patrick White. Touchdown, Tay Von Austin.
But Don Nehlen's Mountaineers enjoy walking in where angels feared to tread.
I think you think that these guys are going to fall over dead for you. Well, I got news for you. They're going to punch you right in the mouth. It's Mountaineer pride.
Nothing cheap, nothing dirty, but West Virginia football. West Virginia football.
Leave no doubt tonight. They shouldn't have played the old Golden Blue. Not this night.
They've done it. They've done it. A perfect season. And the Mountaineers, for the first time in history, undefeated and untied.
Don Nehlen and his Mountaineers, for the second time, have finished a regular season with an unblemished mark.
Ain't no stopping the Golden Blue.
And now recorded from the CRW studios in Almost Heaven, West Virginia, it's the Country Roads Webcast with your host, Jordan Cruz.
What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the CRW podcast here for episode 224, our Robert Morris review and reaction as West Virginia wins the first game in the Rich Rod 2.0 era, 45-3. Tale of two halves indeed, but the second half was the best half, and West Virginia performed the way that they needed to perform in that half and ended up statistically coming out looking pretty good in this game despite some anomalies that occurred there in the first half that, maybe had us a little bit worried. I think they cleaned stuff up in the second half, and I think the team will see the rest of the season will more resemble that second half team. At least that's what we're hoping throughout Mountaineer Nation, right? But I think the most positive thing to talk about here is that it is a win. West Virginia is 1-0 for the first time since 2020, and we're going to give some thoughts on that game throughout this episode, talk a little bit about the stats, and take a look around the Big 12 as well before we wrap up here in our RMU review and reaction podcast. But before I do, just want to say I appreciate you guys tuning into this one any way you choose to do so. Those of you that watch on YouTube, if you would just take a second, hit that thumbs up button. That helps us out a ton with that YouTube algorithm. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel. No better time than the present. Not only do you get game reviews and game preview podcasts here, a live stream every week throughout the season. You also get player grades, snap counts. If you want to become a channel member, you can hit the join button down below where we go over some of that stuff. It's also on the YouTube channel homepage. We also do film reviews for each game for channel members. So a ton of WVU football content coming at you here on the Country Roads Webcast, and we appreciate you guys tuning into these episodes that listen on the audio side as well. You can find them on any podcast platform. If you listen there, leave us a rating. That helps us out on that side of things. And shout out to our guys over at WVSportsNow.com for hosting our episodes on their website as well. So with that being said, I'm just going to give some brief initial thoughts, and then we'll just go over the stats. I'll give a player of the game on each side of the ball, and then we will take a look around the Big 12, and then we'll start to look ahead to Ohio and get ready to, jump into that discussion throughout the week. Can't wait to talk about that game. That one's going to be a lot of fun to look ahead to, but we're going to put a bow on Robert Morris in this episode. So first of all, I think, changes, right? That's kind of the main headline, I guess you could say. Not only changes with, Rich Rod back in town, obviously being the headliner, and that in and of itself was huge and surreal. And the one thing I kept saying, pregame is from the moment I got up to Morgantown, it's like you could feel it in the air. It just felt different now that he was there. Like, I don't know if it's the hope being back or whatever it was, but it's a different feel in the air in Morgantown this season. I think it's really palpable when you're up there. The Rich Rod is home. And so, that's one big change. Of course, the roster, another huge change. We've tried to cover that throughout the offseason here on the Country Roads Webcast YouTube channel, covering each player as they've come in, providing roster updates. But I think it's 80-some new players. I believe 82 is the final number that I heard once we got here to the first game. So a lot of new players. You knew you were going to have some kinks to iron out. I think that's why maybe that first half didn't worry me as much as it would have in years past. I felt like they were going to bounce back in the second half. I remember even at halftime going over and talking to Steven, my co-host here. We have season tickets a section over from one another, and I told him, I said, we need 30 points in the second half, and they ended up dropping nearly that to get 35 points in the second half. I told them we need 40 points in the second half, and they got 35 in the second half. So I'm like, hey, right on with what we were expecting. So, then the stats at the end of the day end up looking pretty good. Like I said, we'll go over those here in a minute. But, not only those being, changes, but then also the other changes that we, completely forgot about with everything going on. The changes to the turf, which I thought looked good. I think it looks better in person than it does in some of the pictures. I was worried about how I would feel about the logo in midfield with the thinner outline, but it looks good. I like it. I like the new turf. And then the glossy blue helmets, man. You can't not, understate how good those looked, especially in person. I don't know how they came through on TV. I haven't had a chance to rewatch the game yet. I did look at some, highlight clips, but in person, man, the way that the sunlight just bounces off that glossy, it looks so great, man. So glad to have those back. It just felt like us again. Then, we're in the pregame. Warm-ups go through. They do what used to be the right now circle at the end of warm-ups before they go into the tunnel and the band performs. Now they play Hell's Bells instead of right now. I tweeted out it's now the Hell's Bell circle instead of the right now circle. But they go into the tunnel, the band performs, which is always amazing. And then, of course, we're waiting on the entrance video, and I had to record it because we did it. We got it back, guys. It's the train. The nostalgia is there for us throughout Mountaineer Nation. The train video back. Awesome intro. Got you super hyped for the game. Then they had a Owen Schmidt little thing to hype up the crowd as well. So I think a lot of the changes were awesome as far as, when you get up there, the feel in Morgantown, the look with the field, and of course the uniforms, the hype video, the intro video, all of that, all well and good. And then you get into the game, and I think despite some, like I called them anomalies when I was talking in the intro there, and I think that's what they are, because I don't think we'll have 4 or 5 fumbles in a game again this season, knock on wood, right? Especially not nearly back to back to back like we had in the first half. But I think when you look individually at all, a lot of the players that stepped up, a lot of the guys that they brought in made plays in this game. I think I took some notes here in the first half. Let me see if I can pull them up here on my phone. My phone died at halftime, but I did want to go over some of these, some of the things that were surprising, some of the things that were impressive. Which second team running back Clay Ash, didn't have that on my bingo card. And I think what's funny, if you go back and look at the depth chart that they released, despite there being oars at a lot of positions on offense, the order that they were listed in, which we kind of speculated on when we were going over the depth chart, because they weren't in alphabetical order, is kind of the actual pecking order, so to speak, there, because it was Nico or Jalen. And then, that was 1 and 2 at QB. And then running back, it was Jaheim or Clay Ash or Sincere Bowers or Dior Hubbard. And that was the order in the game essentially there as well. Clay Ash, second running back in. So wasn't expecting that. And he ran hard while he was in there. But then I think you look on defense, he had an early TFL for Braden Siders. You had a fumble recovery as well for Braden Siders. You had early run stops from Eddie Kelly once he got in there. And the only depth chart surprise on the defensive side was that Devin Grant, got into the game first instead of Eddie Kelly, which Devin Grant made some really good plays in this game also. I think both those guys at the edges are impressive. Can you imagine if you get Jamori Robinson to pair with those guys? Man, that's going to be fun, because this defense, it's everything it was cracked up to be. It's very much attacking, nice defense. Cam Vaughn made a lot of plays in this game. So I think you see a lot of the newcomers, a lot of the transfers that we've talked about throughout the offseason on the CRW make plays in this game. And that's something that I was excited to see. Man Singleton looks explosive when he gets the ball in his hands. I know he had the one fumble, which that was the weirdest thing. I don't know if it played through on TV that they did a double review or something, because it was like they went to review it. They was like, okay, the runner was down. Then they was like, the play's under review. I was like, didn't y'all just review it? And then that's when they ruled that one a fumble. So that was a weird situation that was in that weird sequence of fumbles where Cam Vaughn made one of the most athletic plays I've ever seen, hurdling over a guy that was nearly standing straight up, and he pretty much did it off a vertical jump. But then he had the ball on his inside arm instead of on his outside arm there on the sideline, had it knocked out, and that led to a sequence where he had like 3 straight. I think it was then Grayson Barnes, unfortunately, had one, which he had, 3 good catches. I think he averaged over 10 yards per reception. We'll take a look at the stats momentarily. And then the man Singleton one, and then you end up having a couple more. I think Justin Smith-Brown had one, and then very last play of the game, fitting enough for the way the game went with fumbles. Khalil Wilkins unfortunately fumbled on the final play of the game, I do believe, to result in 5 for the game for the Mountaineers. So that's definitely something they have to clean up. I did note in the first half, and I think, offense played better than the second half. I noted that I thought the defense was ahead of the offense a little bit. And I think that is the case right now. And, early in the season, the defense might carry us, but that's okay, because the offense can come right around. Think about like the 2005 season for West Virginia, how that went. The defense carried us in the first, 2-3 games. And then you really found out, okay, these are the pieces we need to feature on offense. And that offense exploded. And we saw what that season led into. So you never know what could happen. And I think this offense showed some really good players. We know what we have in Jaheim White, one of the best running backs in the conference. Cam Vaughn, I've said it all offseason. I think he could be one of the best receivers in the conference. I think he showcased that. Nico had a hell of a day, only 3 incompletions, over 200 yards when we get into the stats here. Also added over 50 yards rushing. And you had a lot of running backs that, had carries and receivers as well when you go into the mix with some of those slot guys that they've talked up. That's how you run for nearly 400 yards in the game, which we'll hit at when we get to the stats here. So I think other than that, special teams wise, Preston Fox looked good on a couple of returns, nearly broke one kick and nearly broke one punt. So, back to doing what he does there. Pac-Man Fox is, I think, 3 guys nicknamed him, and I love that nickname for him there. So some good plays for him on special teams. So there's just kind of some brief thoughts offensively, defensively, and special teams. I know I got some channel members in here dropping some questions about one thing I want to talk about for sure is the offensive line. So when we get to the channel member comments here towards the end of the episode, I'll talk a little bit more about the offensive line. But with that being said, let's hit up the stats here. Let's take a look at the stats from the game, both team and individually for West Virginia. And then we will kind of put a bow on Robert Morris, take a look around the Big 12 before we wrap up the episode. So 45-3 win. Like I said, that's the most positive takeaway from the at the end of the day. I'm not going to be upset with a 42-point victory. You handle the FCS opponent like you're supposed to. And really, I'm ecstatic to be 1-0. It's been so long, man, since 2020. We haven't been 1-0 here at WVU. So that's exciting in and of itself. 26 first downs and you hold them under 10 first downs. You're going to win a lot of games if you get over 25 first downs and if you hold your opponent to single digits. I promise you that. Third down defense was great. They held Robert Morris to 3 of 15. Third down offense, not the best, especially against FCS. You probably want to be 50% or more. You're close to that at 5 or 11. Did, 1 of 2 on our fourth down attempts. 123 total yards. That's all Robert Morris gains. And, I know there were a couple plays on a 3rd and 10 that we gave up, a couple pass plays. But, you compare that to where we've been here as a program defensively at WVU, where the secondary has been such a struggle. Look at our FCS opponent last season, guys, and you compare that, a Jordan Leslie defensive coordinator that had been here for years with guys that he had been around for years. And he gave up over 300 and some yards to an FCS offense. Couldn't have this type of performance ever at any point in his career. And now you compare that to now Zach Alley, someone West Virginia went out and paid more than they've ever paid to get an assistant, got a coordinator from a near blue blood program there in Oklahoma. And you wanted to see how that would work out. Well, how about he's been here about 6 months, hasn't been around these guys a lot, holds the entire Robert Morris team to 123 yards, and he only gives up 70 yards passing. So that's how you flip the script with what you've done defensively, both with the players that you've brought in, I think, because we saw some really talented guys there, but more importantly, with the coordinator that you've brought in. I just hope we can keep him longer than a year or two because he's going to be a head coach before long. Zach Alley's an absolute shooting star in college football, and he's going to be a great coordinator for us this season. Can't wait to see what this defense does. You see, they hold Robert Morris to 123 total yards, 70 passing yards, 7 of 22 the RMU quarterback was. And, this was probably with being a little bit basic. He was still sending some pressure, but nothing exotic like we're going to see from this defense. And also, they couldn't run the ball at all. I think the run defense was the most impressive thing for me in the game. They hold Robert Morris to 53 yards rushing on the contest, only 1.4 yards per carry. Penalties were an issue. That's the main thing you got to clean up in this game. Turnovers and penalties. 9 penalties for 69 yards for West Virginia and the 4 fumbles that the Mountaineers lost. Of course, that is the team stats. Let's go individually here. So you look, Nico Marchiol, like we said, 3 incompletions. He goes 17 of 20, 224, and a touchdown. And I think, for all the talk of all these quarterbacks, kind of being in the competition, and maybe it was a heated battle down to the very end, it definitely looked like Nico was trusted a little bit more because when the game was close, they weren't pulling him out. I think West Virginia had not had those turnovers and got ahead, maybe 24-3 in the first half. You probably see Jalen and Scotty a little bit sooner. Jalen had some good plays in the run game. Thought he made some good reads. I think some of the QB run stuff looks a little bit more explosive with Scotty and Jalen, so maybe that allows you to use them periodically in packages, even if Nico is the guy like it looks like he's going to be. But I think the passing offense was super crisp with Nico in there, as you can see, 17 of 20, 224, and a touchdown. I'm sure we graded out high. Can't wait to look at those player grades here in a little bit today. Rushing wise, now this is where we get to the fun stuff. We knew we were waiting for this in a Rich Rod offense. And can we just talk about that for a second as well? I probably should hit on this when I was going over my thoughts. How fun was it to watch the offense again, guys? We talked about changes being the theme of this episode. That's another change. We're not waiting until 1 second left on the play clock doing 86 motions, man. We're getting it and we're going. I mean, we're snapping the ball every 10, 15 seconds. That's what we were hoping to see, spot the ball, right? And we were indeed doing just that. And, of course, against Robert Morris, sometimes Rich Rod was reeling off the same play 4 times in a row. And guess what? It was working, which is what you love to see from this offense. And you can do that with the tempo that we utilize. 18 carries, 93 yards for Jaheim, 2 touchdowns. And, a lot of people would say he underperformed in the game. But, I mean, look at the stat line. Over 5 yards a carry, 2 touchdowns. Pretty good day at the office. And I think a lot more, in the future, he'll be over 100 yards rushing. You would like to see that against the FCS opponent. We'll talk more about that when I talk offensive line here in a bit. But then you look at across the board with the run game. I mean, you ran for nearly 400 yards. We went over the numbers. You can't ask for more than that. How about Scotty Fox? Came in the game, first series, breaks off 59-yard rushing touchdown. 2 carries, 63 yards, and a touchdown for him. Nico gets into the end zone as well for a touchdown, and he had 13 carries of his own for 56 yards, so over 4 yards a carry for Nico. Really like the play that he scored on. You fake the toss, or it's actually probably a read. He's probably reading the end where he can toss it or keep it. The read toss play, I like to run that on college football 26, and that's the first touchdown for West Virginia on the season. So shout out to our guy, Steven. He had the correct guess when we guessed the first touchdown of the season. He guessed Nico on a QB run. He got that one correct. Sincere Bowers looked really good when he was in there, and this isn't a knock on Clay Ash, but I think Sincere Bowers should be running back number 2. When he gets the ball in his hands, it's just super impressive. He's super explosive. And I know this is Robert Morris, so, I don't mean this as a direct comparison, but, the only thing I can think of as a basis to compare it to is when you were playing Maryland and Steve Slayton was the guy. He was, getting 15 to 20 carries per game like Jaheim White is now. But you snuck Noel Devine in again in that game against Maryland, and he got 4 or 5 carries and ran for like 100 yards. Obviously, what Sincere did wasn't quite on that level, but when he got the ball in his hands, you could see the explosiveness, and you're like, okay, this guy needs to play more. That's the comparison that I'm making there. As Sincere Bowers finishes with 6 carries, 54 yards, and a touchdown. The 26-yard touchdown run was nice. He averaged 9 yards a carry in his first appearance as a Mountaineer. You love to see that. And how about Jalen Henderson? Only 20 yards per carry for him as well. 2 carries, 40 yards. Like I said, the run game stuff looked pretty explosive with him in there, whereas the passing game looks a little bit better with Nico in there, in my opinion. Khalil Wilkins, when he came in there late, he did get some action on the final drive there. 2 carries, 31 yards. He's over 15 yards a carry. Man Singleton on his 2 jet sweeps. I know one of them he unfortunately did in a fumble, but he looked very good on those handoffs. 2 carries, 24 yards. Clay Ash, like we said, getting the running back 2 role. Nothing to laugh at with his performance. Over 4 yards a carry, 5 carries, 23 yards, ran tough. And how about Tyler Jackledge getting in the game and getting a 10-yard carry? The newly added running back, just got here like a week ago, already got in the game and got a carry. And then you had the Rodney Gallagher jet sweep for 9 yards, and then Justin Smith-Brown with a negative yardage play, unfortunately. But I think we'll see some more plays from him this season. Receivers, Cam Vaughn showed out as expected. Told you guys all off season, watch out for Cam. More yards as a redshirt freshman, still learning to play the position than any receiver we had in a single season in the Neil Brown era. And he showed that in game 1, 7 catches, 126 yards and a touchdown. Absolutely burned him on the deep ball for the 46-yard pass. Hauled it in over the shoulder. Beautiful catch on a beautiful throw from Nico. And then, of course, showed the athleticism multiple times. Sometimes they would just hit him out on a little hitch. He'd make a guy miss and turn it into a bigger gain. Or even he'd hurdle over the guy like he did on the one play that unfortunately ended in a fumble. Grayson Barnes, going to be a weapon this season. 12 yards per catch, 3 catches, 37 yards. Jaden Bray, 3 for 26, the other starting outside receiver. And, of course, we talked about the tight ends being involved in a Rich Rod offense now. It's a little bit different than when he was first here, and we've talked about that going over the film review for channel members. We've taken a look at the Jack State All-22 film, how much the tight ends were involved. And you see that 4 catches from the tight ends in this game, as Jacob Barrick also hauled in a 15-yard reception. Jaheim White, 2 catches, 12 yards. Logan Ramper did get in later in the game, had a reception for 8 yards, and man with the 1 catch for 7. Of course, we talked about the fumbles already, unfortunately. Defensively, take a look at some numbers here because I think you did have some standouts. Not surprised to see Chase Wilson lead the team in tackles. Chase Wilson and Fred Perry up there. I think that those are guys that have been talked about a lot all offseason. I think Chase Wilson was my pick to lead the team in tackles. Fred Perry is going to be all over the field as expected. The linebackers really, I think, played well in this game. They really did. They were attacking, whether it was Carrico, whether it was Wilson. Even when you had Cutter in there, you had Ben Bogle in there. Those guys looked good also. Ashton Woods, the UNC transfer, got some work. And you look here at this attacking defense. A sack and a TFL and a half for Chase Wilson. A sack and 2 TFLs for Reed Carrico. 2 sacks and 2.5 TFLs for Hammond Russell. How about Hammond Russell? Shout out to Ham Russell, coming from that defensive tackle spot, having one of the best games of his career here, making the start here in his senior season. Impressed with what he did there, which actually I believe he was awarded the player of the game that the team releases. The team's player of the games were Nico Marchiol, Preston Fox, and Hammond Russell there for their work on offense, defensive, and special teams, respectively, by the way. Then you get a TFL for Devin Grant as well. Half a TFL for Adam Tomczyk, one of the newcomers from junior college. Half a TFL for Nate Gabriel, the youngster still getting some playing time. So 8 TFLs and 4 sacks in the first game under Zach Alley. You also force a turnover. You have multiple pass breakups. Braden Siders with 1, Eddie Kelly with 1. So you have those as well there. So I think the Zach Alley defense showed out in game 1. How about my players of the game, though, to wrap up our discussion and put a bow on Robert Morris? I think offensively, I'm torn between Nico and Cam Vaughn, but I'm going to go Cam Vaughn. Despite the fumble, man, he's just super impressive. He's everything that I thought he'd be, and maybe even more now that he's really continuing to kind of mold his game and get better at his craft now that he's a sophomore this year. And the sky is the absolute limit for him. So excited about his future, not only this season, but throughout his career. So I'll give him my player of the game on offense. Defensively, a lot of different ways you can go here, man. The school went Ham Russell, and that's probably a really good choice. But because of that, I'm going to just go a little bit different with mine. I want to give, a different pick here. So I'm going to go Chase Wilson. I think he's got the capability to be the leader of this defense on the field, sometimes verbally as well. He's vocal out there, a vocal leader. I thought the communication was great on defense. He's a big part of that. A sack, a TFL and a half, great performance, and also leading the team in tackles. So I'll give mine to Chase Wilson on defense. So there's my players of the game, and that'll put a bow on the West Virginia win over Robert Morris. Let's take a look around the Big 12 now. All right, so running through the Big 12 scores here around the Big 12 following week 1, which actually still one game left. TCU and UNC play on Monday, so they won't have the score for that one yet, but let's talk about what we do have. UCF taking down Jacksonville State. Close game there, 17-10 win for the Knights. Oklahoma State, 27-7 win over UT Martin. But unfortunately, Hoss Haney, with I believe it was a broken foot, going to be out at least probably half the season after he's undergone surgery. Hate to hear that. And you guys know we liked Hoss Haney throughout the offseason when West Virginia was targeting him as well. I think he's a good quarterback. Houston with a shutout win over Stephen F. Austin, 27-0. Cincinnati hung right in with Nebraska to the very end, but Nebraska outlasts them 20-17. Those were the Thursday games. On Friday, we had Kansas taking down Wagner 46-7. Kansas arguably looks to be one of the more impressive Big 12 teams thus far this season. And funny enough, they played 2 games before West Virginia played 1, since they played on week 0 and then played on Friday in week 1. Funny enough, there's Kansas now 2-0 on the season. Georgia Tech took down Colorado 27-20. Colorado hung right in that game as well. That one came down to the very end. Georgia Tech executing that late drive there. Haynes King, a weapon in the run game for Georgia Tech. They like to pound that rock. That was a fun game to watch, though. Caden Salter looks pretty good at quarterback for Colorado. They might be all right and then bounce back from losing Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter better than expected. Baylor, not as great a performance as I thought they would have. I thought they would win this game against Auburn, to be honest with you. And unfortunately, they lose it by a couple of touchdowns. 38-24 victory for Auburn over Baylor there on Friday night. Then we get into the Saturday contest. Of course, we talked about your Mountaineers 1-0 with the 45-3 win over Robert Morris. Iowa State dominated South Dakota. They go to 2-0 on the season after taking down Kansas State in week 0. And Kansas State nearly, a victim of an upset there. Those Dakota schools sometimes are dangerous, and North Dakota hung right with them. Kansas State pulls it out, though, 38-35. Arkansas Pine Bluff dominated by 60 points there, 67-7. Texas Tech in their debut puts up 67 points with their new look team that they paid a lot of good money for, right? But they weren't the highest scorer in the Big 12 this week. No, that honor goes to BYU, who also has the largest margin of victory, 69-0. Hey, BYU says everyone's thinking we lost our quarterback. We're not going to be involved in the Big 12 hunt. Let me show you a little something. We'll start the season off with a 69-0 victory. Arizona State takes down Northern Arizona 38-19. Arizona handles Hawaii easily 40-6. And then Utah over UCLA 43-10 at UCLA. Like we said, if Utah really is adding the good offense to, what we know they can be defensively, I think they have probably the best offensive line in the conference as well. They could actually, unfortunately, be a scary team this season for the rest of the conference. And they looked at it in week one there, taking down the Big Ten team there, UCLA, on the road by 33 points. And then, of course, we will have TCU in North Carolina coming tonight. I'm recording this on Monday, dropping this episode on September 1st, and TCU takes on the Bill Belichick Tar Heels tonight in Chapel Hill. That should be a fun game to watch. I think TCU is going to get the win. That's my prediction. We'll see what happens, though. I was wrong on some other picks here in week one, but there's our look around the Big 12 in week one. And, of course, when we hit our Ohio preview episode here, which will be the next podcast episode we release, we'll make our predictions in some of the games for week two throughout the conference. Our first chance getting to do that this season. But that's pretty much what I had, guys. Wanted to share some of my thoughts, go over the stats, and take a look around the conference. Other than that, I'm going to get to couple questions here from channel members here, which channel members, of course, do get the privilege sometimes to watch us as we record episodes. They get a chance to be in there live, chat with us, share some thoughts of their own. And, of course, if you want that ability, you can hit the join button down in the video description or on the YouTube channel homepage here on the Country Roads Webcast YouTube channel. It helps us keep this mic recording and that camera rolling, and you get a ton of bonus WVU football content throughout the season. No better time to do it than the present, especially this coming week, as we'll have a game watch-along on Saturday for channel members there at the Almost Heaven level here on the Country Roads Webcast channel. But can't support us that way, fast, easy, and free ways. Just hit the like button there on the video here on YouTube. That helps us out a ton with that algorithm. And be sure to subscribe here to the channel as well. It doesn't cost you anything just to hit that subscribe button and get these videos directly into your feed. And shout out to you guys that listen on the audio side as well. Appreciate you guys that tune in on any podcast platform. With that being said, I do see Mountaineer Athletes in here with me, one of our channel members, and he did drop a question in here. How do I feel about the offensive line, he asks. Oh, man, it's a tough question because, like I said, you did end up running for 400 yards nearly. So that's the positive side of it. That's the silver lining, I guess. But I think for me, when you're playing an FCS opponent, you expect to kind of push them off the line, expect to see some wide lanes for the run game. And a lot of the game that wasn't there, a lot of the bigger plays in the run game were guys breaking tackles at the point of attack and then getting loose. And I think, that worries me a little bit. But also we have to take into account everything that's new along that offensive line and how it might take them a game or two to, find their chemistry, to find, to gel a little bit, to know exactly where each other's going to be kind of innately. So, we do have to take that into account. And I also, not predicting this and I'm not knowing that it's going to happen, but there could be a different mix of guys. They may try out some other guys, say, hey, let's move this guy over, or let's bring this guy in that's really good and was barely beat out, and let's see if he has better chemistry, because I think that's what it's about more than anything, especially when you have new guys. I think a lot of these guys are, that we brought in, I can name you 8 to 10 of them that are really talented, but it's which 5 are going to work together the best to be that cohesive unit, that chain link unit that you need to all mesh and make this thing work offensively to get some push some guys off the ball, because I didn't see that too often, unfortunately, and to open those lanes for the run game that we're going to need in this offense. And I think in the second half, you did see it a little bit more, so maybe that goes to show you that even as the game wore on, they were building chemistry. I hope that is the case, and we're going to find out here against Ohio, but we'll see. But they did nearly run for 400 yards, so can't hate on them too much or anything like that, but I just do want to see improvement from the offensive line. That is one thing I want to see coming out of this game. From week 1 to week 2, what's the old adage? You improve the most from week 1 to week 2, game 1 to game 2, right? So let's hope that is the case for our offensive line. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. I think they will get better as the season goes along and they build that cohesion. That's what I will say on the positive side of that. But appreciate our channel members. Appreciate you throwing in the question there, Mountaineer Athletes, and appreciate you guys that are watching this, though, on the main channel or listening on the audio side as well. If you are watching, you got any questions, comments you want to throw them in the comment section. We appreciate those interactions as well as we continue to try and build the CRW community throughout Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, that'll put a bow here on Season 8, Episode 224 of the CRW podcast, our Robert Morris review and reaction. Like I said, we'll be back later this week to preview the game against Ohio. That's going to be a fun one. Can't wait to get to it. 1-0 on the 2025 season here in the Rich Rod 2.0 era. You love to see it. Let's keep it going. Let's go get another win this upcoming week, and let's keep this thing rolling here as we begin this new era of West Virginia football, and I can't wait to continue to talk about it with you guys. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.
Really wanna know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those